So welcome to Bhakti Vaibhav session, and we are going to discuss the 14th chapter today. So in 13th chapter, we saw how Narad Muni comes, how Vidura comes, and he destroys Dhritarashtra's illusion, and he ensures that Dhritarashtra quits home. Okay, that was the title of the previous chapter. Right? Dhritarashtra quits home. So he quit home, and Narad Muni pacifies Maharaj Yudhishthira. So we had primarily two sections. One is Vidura's instructions to Dhritarashtra, that was the prominent section. And then when Maharaj Yudhishthira is lamenting about the absence of his uncles and aunt, then Narad Muni comes and gives him instructions. So that is another prominent section. These are the two prominent sections within the 13th chapter. And in the 50th verse of this 13th chapter, if you remember, Narad Muni tells Maharaj Yudhishthira that the Lord has already performed his duties to help the demigods, and he is awaiting the rest. You Pandavas may wait as long as the Lord is here on earth. So this is the link to the 14th chapter. Okay. So at the start of the 14th chapter, we will see that Yudhishthira Maharaj, he observes many inauspicious omens. And because the indication has already been given to him by Narad Muni that the Lord would be disappearing in near future, so Maharaj Yudhishthira anticipates, or he starts thinking that that might have happened, because of which these inauspicious omens are visible. Okay. So this is the link, and if we see the breakup of this 14th chapter. So first couple of verses I have put here as 1 to 5, but first couple of verses is basically an introduction of setting the context that Arjuna went to Dwarka and he has not come back. And then Maharaj Yudhishthira observes the downfall in people's character and qualities. So that's the first thing that he observes. Okay. And then observing these, then he speaks to Bhima, recounting his worst fears. Basically means that he starts to think that Krishna has disappeared from this world, because of which all bad qualities have started appearing in people's consciousness. Okay. Then from 10 to 21, Maharaj Yudhishthira will tell what are all the inauspicious omens that he is observing now, and which forebodes that something bad has happened or is going to happen. And because Arjuna has not come back from Dwaraka for almost 7 months, then Maharaj Yudhishthira is very anxious and is sharing that with Bhima. In 22 to 24, we will see that Arjuna arrives, and Maharaj Yudhishthira, he observes that Arjuna is not bright, or no, he's not glowing, or his natural effulgence has disappeared, and he is completely dejected, he is completely moroseful and sorrow. And this has not been seen by Maharaj Yudhishthira any time in his whole life. So when he sees Arjuna like this, then he starts inquiring about what is the reason why Arjuna is appearing like this. So first he inquires about welfare of the Yadus. So if we see the purport of the 50th verse of 13th chapter, Srila Prabhupada writes at the end that now the Lord is awaiting the annihilation of his own dynasty called Yaduvamsha, who had appeared by his will in this world. He wanted to take them away before his own departure to his eternal abode. And Narada, like Vidura, did not disclose the imminent annihilation of the Yadu dynasty, but indirectly gave a hint to the king and his brothers to wait till the incident happened and the Lord departed. So it's, he is awaiting the rest, which basically means that he is awaiting the annihilation of the whole Yadu dynasty itself. So Maharaj Yudhishthira's inquiries start with inquiring about the welfare of the Yadu dynasty. He did not want to directly confront, or when something, if we think that something bad is going to happen, we normally don't want to confront that right in the front. Okay, we try to avoid it if it is very, very bad, or if we think it's a very inauspicious thing for us. We try to avoid it, and we try to ask so many other things, and finally, when nothing is conclusive, then we come to the actual point. So Maharaj Yudhishthira is conscious of that. He is already afraid that Krishna has left. Okay, but he did not want to directly ask Arjuna about this. Okay, so he asks indirectly about the welfare of the Yadus, because that was something which was Krishna's plan, as indicated by Narad Muni to Maharaj Yudhishthira, that is awaiting some more things to happen, which is basically annihilation of the Yadus, as Prabhupada points out in the purport. And then after that, Krishna would leave. So Maharaj Yudhishthira's inquiry is about the welfare of the Yadus, that is from 25 to 33. And from 34 to 38, he inquires directly about Krishna and remembers his glories and how he has attained all kinds of opulence only by the mercy of the Lord. And when Arjuna did not reply even at that point, then Yudhishthira inquires about Arjuna's own welfare. Okay. Next 7 verses from 39 to 44. So in this chapter, it's Arjuna will not respond to Maharaj Yudhishthira. He will not say that the Lord has disappeared. That happens in the next chapter. But this chapter is basically Maharaj Yudhishthira's recounting of all the inauspicious things that had come forth because the Lord has disappeared from this world. Okay. So, in this, see, the split-up which I have made, actually these 3 can be combined. Okay. So, there are sections. First section is where Maharaj Yudhishthira is observing the omens, inauspicious omens, and is also discussing with Bhima about this. So, the inauspicious omen section is from 1 to 21. Then Arjuna arrives, okay, that's from 20 to 24. And from 25 to 44, you have Yudhishthira Maharaj's inquiries to Arjuna. So these are the 3 broad categories, broad split up. Within that, you have these 3, sub split ups, you can say. Okay, so probably when I'm giving this to you, I'll put that, these 3 broad categories, and within that, we'll have this further sub splits. Okay. So, text 1 is Suta Goswami speaking to the Shaunaka Rishis. Sri Suta Goswami said, Arjuna went to Dwaraka to see Lord Shri Krishna and other friends, and also to learn from the Lord of his next activities. Because by this time, everything is done. From the Pandavas' point of view, okay, they have been coronated, or Maharaj Yudhishthira has been coronated as the emperor of the world. Okay, and all the inauspicious or all the demoniac elements of the society have been annihilated. Okay, so Krishna's purpose is actually fulfilled. So Arjuna wanted to go and see the Lord to find out what his next activities are going to be. Okay. A few months passed and Arjuna did not return. Maharaj Yudhishthira then began to observe some inauspicious omens which were fearful in themselves. Okay, so a few months have passed and Arjuna did not return, but it's not something which has not happened before. Okay, Arjuna has been absent for quite some time before also. Okay, but Maharaj Yudhishthira at that point did not see any inauspicious omens. See, even when they were in the forest, in Vanaparva, in Mahabharata, Arjuna went for almost 5 to 6 years to the heavenly planets. So they missed him. In Mahabharata it's mentioned how they missed Arjuna. But they were happy, or they were getting information that he was well. Okay, Lomasha Rishi came, then Indra himself came and told that Arjuna is well and he's doing fine, like this. Even though the separation was big and it was quite 5-6 years like that, and there were long periods of time and Maharaj Yudhishthira was not getting any information about Arjuna. So this has happened before. Here, a few months have passed, basically 7 months, which will come in the subsequent verses. So 7 months have passed and Arjuna did not return, and Maharaj Yudhishthira then began to observe some inauspicious omens. Okay, so this is what started his worries. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he explains that the personal presence of the Lord, okay, by the personal presence of the Lord, all opulence, okay, all opulence or whatever is required for peace and prosperity is automatically achieved or attained. And when the Lord disappears, then there's a problem. Then all the inauspicious things come up. So Srila Prabhupada, he gives an introduction basically, and he says that that the Supreme Lord is just like a sun, and millions and billions of suns are created by him and inherited by him within his one breathing period. Okay, in the material world, the sun is considered to be the source of all productivity and material energy, and only due to the sun can we have the necessities of life. Similarly, okay, during the personal presence of the Lord on the earth, all paraphernalia for our peace prosperity, especially religion and knowledge, were in full display because of the Lord's presence. Just as there is a full flood of light in the presence of the glowing sun. And when Maharaj Yudhishthira observed discrepancies in his kingdom, then it forebodes or it foretells that the Lord might have disappeared. So Yudhishthira already had this idea because the indication was given to him by Narad Muni that Lord would disappear soon. He saw that the direction of eternal time had changed, and this was very fearful. There were disruptions in the seasonal regularities. The people in general had become very greedy, angry, and deceitful, and he saw that they were adopting foul means of livelihood. Okay. So these irregularities Maharaj Yudhishthira had not observed before. Okay, these things have not been seen before. In Kali Yuga, we see this regularly, or rather, we see this every day, every moment. Okay, where the seasons. Anyways, we'll discuss this. So, Srila Prabhupada writes that changes of seasonal regulations, foul means of livelihood, greed, anger, and fraudulence become rampant. And he explains what it basically means. So, foul means of livelihood, Srila Prabhupada says, is it indicates deviation from one's occupational duty. So, one who deviates from occupational duty, then he is, he has taken shelter of foul means of livelihood. Everyone should do some work for his livelihood. But if he is not doing his occupational duty, then it is adharma. It is a sinful activity on his part. So everybody is engaged, or people start engaging in foul means of livelihood. Basically, they are doing work which is not according to their varna. Okay. So this we see in Kali Yuga. People don't even know their varna. Okay. Because it's all, it's the whole population is filled with varna shankara. So people do not know their varna. And if they do not know their varna, then they do not know what their prescribed duty is. Okay. Prescribed duties can be known only when one person situates himself or a person situates himself in proper varna. If he does not know his varna himself, he cannot do his prescribed duties. So anyway, the activities are adharmic. Okay. So this is rampant in Kali Yuga, but Maharaj Yudhishthira was surprised to see this during his kingdom, where people are not engaging in their prescribed duties. Okay. And people have become too greedy for wealth and power. And Srila Prabhupada writes that a man becomes too greedy for wealth and power when he has no higher objective in life. So when the Lord disappears, then the goal of life or people's consciousness to attain the goal of life also diminishes. And because of that, they become greedy for wealth and power. Okay, so ignorance is the cause, Srila Prabhupada writes. And changes in direction of eternal time basically means that seasonal regulations are not proper. Okay, time passed with the sequence of seasons being reversed. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says this. It basically means that time moves in a certain direction, and if everything is proper, then the seasons they come accordingly. Now, first you have the spring season, then summer, then you have rainy season, then you have winter season. Then again it goes on like this. But when the direction of eternal time is changed, or it's mentioned here, right? That he saw that direction of eternal time has changed, which basically means that seasons are coming out of order. So they are not in proper order anymore. So winters are becoming more and more hot. Okay. And summers, there are rains during summertime. Okay. And flower bearing season is not bearing any more flowers. Like this. So these things started to appear at that time itself. All ordinary transactions and dealings became polluted with cheating, even between friends. And in familial affairs, there was always misunderstanding between fathers, mothers, and sons, between well-wishers and between brothers. Even between husband and wife, there were always strain and quarrel. So, these things we see in Kali Yuga. Okay, it's still happening. Srila Prabhupada, he speaks specifically about the cheaters. Okay, and he says of the 4 principles of malpractice, which are basically 4 imperfections. Okay, the cheating is the most prominent, he says. And he says that this cheating practice is there in the conditioned soul because they are in the material world, primarily due to their being imbued with an unnatural desire to lord over it. So we have discussed this many times before, that the living entity's natural position is to render devotional service, is to render service to Krishna. And when he has the desire to lord over the material nature, then it's an unnatural desire. And because of this unnatural desire, then he has this cheating propensity. Okay, the cheating propensity is basically a part of the conditioning of the soul. Okay, so a living entity can live within this material world and think he's happy only when he has this cheating propensity. If he does not have a cheating propensity, then he cannot live in this material world. So any conditioned soul who thinks that he can be in this material world, he can be happy in this material world, he can satisfy himself with this material world, it is possible only when he has this cheating tendency. Okay, because the original tendency or the original cheating tendency is to lord over the material nature by basically the understanding is that the Lord, that Krishna is the proprietor of the material world and spiritual world, and he is the enjoyer of both. Okay, but when we try to become the enjoyer by throwing out Krishna, then it's a cheating propensity that a conditioned soul has. Okay, so that cheating propensity is the most prominent, and it is unnatural. So any conditioned soul who is there in this material world and who thinks that he can enjoy within this material world, he must have this cheating propensity within him. Okay. In the conditioned state, the living being is not satisfied even if he actually becomes the lord of all that he serves, which he never becomes. And therefore, he becomes a victim of all kinds of cheating. So he has a cheating propensity so that he can lord over the material world. But ultimately what happens is that he himself becomes cheated because he never gets the satisfaction or happiness that he desires or that he looks for. Okay, it never happens. And this is an unsatisfactory state of affairs which can be mitigated by one process, and that is devotional service of the Lord. In course of time, it came to pass that people in general became accustomed to greed, anger, pride, etc. Maharaj Yudhishthira, observing all these omens, spoke as follows to his younger brother. Okay. So these first few verses that we have here from third, fourth and fifth. Okay. So these are the initial signs of an adharmic society. Okay. When adharma becomes prominent, these three verses basically explain what are the first symptoms which are seen. Okay. So we have this seasonal irregularities. Okay. People become angry, deceitful, they become greedy. Their prescribed duties they don't follow. Okay. And then there's quarrel between friends, between father, mother, sons, well-wishers, brothers, husband and wife, like this. And again, greed, anger and pride, it increases. So he observes all these moments. So Srila Prabhupada, he calls these symptoms as inhuman. Greed, anger, irreligiosity and hypocrisy is rampant in society, and these are inhuman symptoms. Okay, so human being should not have greed. He should not get angry. Okay, and there's not even a question of a person being an atheist. Okay, so atheism is a symbol of inhuman activities, because if you see, atheism is one who does not know about God or who does not have faith in the presence of the Supreme Lord. Animals don't know about it. Okay, so in one sense we can say animals are atheists because they have no idea of the Lord's presence. And if a human being also acts like an animal, then he is also basically inhuman. He is animalistic only. Greed, anger and these kind of symptoms are seen in the lower society or in animal society. So these things are symptoms of being inhuman. So these are inhuman symptoms. All these symptoms of degraded society were unknown to the people of the time, and it was astonishing for them to have experienced them with the advent of the Kali Yuga or the age of quarrel. So these things are very prominent in Kali Yuga now, but these symptoms were unknown to people at that time. They were not even aware that such kind of things can exist. Just like this, when we say that as the Kali Yuga progresses, then people will live only for 16, 17, 18 years. Okay, and so their height will be only of that of grass, only about 3 feet, 4 feet and all. And it looks very astonishing to us that how is that possible, that a person who's 18, 19 years old, he will be considered as a grand old man, right? It's there in the 12th canto, and we cannot imagine that. Okay, but then when these symptoms start to appear, then it's very astonishing. It's very amazing that these things are happening. So we can just imagine that this greed, anger, pride, and all these inauspicious things which Maharaj Yudhishthira is experiencing now, it was not even known at the time of Dwapara Yuga. Okay, and when these things started to appear, when they saw that people are fighting amongst themselves, brothers are fighting amongst themselves, husband and wife are fighting amongst themselves, fathers and mothers are not trusted anymore, then this looks very astonishing. The same way we will find the progress of Kali Yuga very astonishing. At the end of Kali Yuga, probably. So it's like that for them. So we can see how high the culture was, or how high the moral or the morality of people was, morality or the sense of dharma that people used to follow during Dwapara Yuga, and how it has degraded. Now because we are born in this, we think whatever is happening in Kali Yuga is kind of normal. Okay, it's kind of okay like this. But then it's not like that. Maharaj Yudhishthira said to his younger brother Bhimsen, I sent Arjuna to Dwaraka to meet his friends and to learn from the personality of Godhead Krishna of his program of work. Since he departed, 7 months have passed, yet he has not returned. I do not know factually how things are going there. So he is expressing, Maharaj Yudhishthira is expressing his doubts to Bhima. And then he says, is the Lord going to quit his earthly pastimes as Devarshi Narada indicated? Has that time already arrived? Now he is expressing his concern. Okay. So this was always there at the back of Yudhishthira Maharaj's mind, that Lord Krishna can disappear at any moment. And when Arjuna did not return, and especially when he saw this initial 3, 4, 5th, 3rd, 4th and 5th verse symptoms which are mentioned in 3rd, 4th and 5th verse, he was kind of almost sure that Krishna has disappeared. So Srila Prabhupada in his purport to this, he takes cue from this, Lord going to quit his earthly pastimes. And Srila Prabhupada explains a little bit about his different functions that he performs when Krishna comes to this material world, different functions that he performs and his different expansions. So he says Krishna has many plenary expansions, and each and every one of them, although equally powerful, executes different functions. And then he quotes from Bhagavad Gita different verses where Krishna speaks about his mission when he comes, what he does. Okay. So the Lord as Sri Krishna functions in different sphere of transcendental exchange with different grades of devotees. So Krishna interacts with both non-devotees as well as devotees when he comes. So his way or his different functions of interaction between his devotees is different, and with his non-devotees it's also different. And if you see with non-devotees, he exhibits his Vishnu form where he kills them, he annihilates them like this. And with different grades of devotees, in Dwaraka he'll show his opulence more. Okay, in Mathura, opulence would be there, but along with that, some intimacies also will be there. And in Vrindavan, the intimacy would be much, much more, and opulence will not be that prominent. Okay, so different features of the Lord are displayed with respect to different grades of devotees, and also to the non-devotees or to the demons, like this. Okay. But, and Srila Prabhupada said, Krishna appears once every 24 hours of Brahma, or that is 2000 Chaturyugas. Okay. Every 2000 Chaturyugas, the Lord appears. And all his transcendental pastimes are displayed in each and every universe in a routine spool. Okay. But in that routine spool, the functions of Lord Krishna, the Lord Vasudeva, etc., are complex problems for the layman. Okay. What's a spool? Routine spool is like you wind a thread. The thread goes around. Okay. When you wind it around a small pole or something. Okay. So that's called as a spool. Okay. It looks the same. Same way it goes around like this. So the Lord's appearance and disappearance, it's like a spool. It just goes around and around during the course of Lord Brahma's period. But the functions of Lord Krishna, Lord Vasudeva, are complex problems for the layman. Because a layman or one who is not a devotee, he cannot understand how the Lord functions. What are the different expansions and what are the different expansions that that participate in the Lord's pastimes. Okay. So here we see, it says, when the Lord, however, appears in his person as Lord Shri Krishna, his other plenary portions also join in him by his inconceivable potency called Yogamaya. And thus, the Lord Krishna of Vrindavan is different from the Lord Krishna of Mathura or the Lord Krishna of Dwaraka. Okay, so now this point is to be understood clearly because I think in the 11th chapter we discussed that the Lord Srila Prabhupada himself writes in the purport that Lord Krishna of Vrindavan is non-different from the Krishna of Mathura and who is non-different from Krishna of Dwaraka. Okay, so from Tattva point of view, from the personality point of view, it's the same Krishna who is in the different places. Okay, Dwaraka, Mathura and Vrindavan. But the activities that he performs, the pastimes that he performs, there he manifests his different expansions. Okay, so in that way, the Lord Krishna of Vrindavan is different from Lord Krishna of Mathura, who is different from Lord Krishna of Dwaraka. Okay, so different plenary expansions, they manifest their potency in different places. So that way, we can say that the personality is different. But the Krishna who is there in Vrindavan, in Dwaraka and Mathura, they are the same person. Okay. So it's like you can say Achintya, it's difficult to understand, but that is how we should understand. The person is the same, okay, from Tattva point of view, it's the same Lord Krishna, but his functions and his activities are different, and all his different functions and activities are exhibited by his different plenary expansions who enter or who are within him, who are within Krishna when he comes from the spiritual world. Okay, so that way they are different. But actually they are not different because the expansions are also coming from Krishna only. So Krishna is the same in all these different places. At the same time his functions are carried out by his different plenary expansions. Even though it is done physically, we will see that it's Krishna who is doing it. But actually, Acharya has explained, right? When the demons are killed, now it's the Vishnu aspect of Krishna who kills the demons. You have heard that before? Yes. So like that. Okay, so that's how it should be understood. The Virat Rupa of Lord Krishna is also different from him by his inconceivable potency. The Virat Rupa exhibited on the battlefield of Kurukshetra is the material conception of his form. Therefore, it should be understood that when Lord Krishna was apparently killed by the bow and arrow of a hunter, the Lord left his so-called material body in the material world. So the universal form of the Lord is imaginary because the Lord does not have a material form. But just to bewilder the atheistic class of people, then he left his so-called universal form, okay, which is it's a material conception. Anyway, this discussion will come in the second and third canto, okay, about this Virat Rupa. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada also gives this point that there's no cause of actually Maharaj Yudhishthira's lamentation, because one who understands the Supreme Lord is everywhere, and we also saw in the previous chapter. What the previous chapter? No, the chapter before that Krishna is there everywhere. Okay, and he can appear, based on the devotee's qualification. When we were discussing about the Lord appearing in the womb of Uttara, say Maharaj Parikshit, we discussed that the Lord appeared there and then he disappeared. And Srila Prabhupada specifically wrote, and it does not mean that the Lord did not exist within the womb of Uttara. It's just that he appeared and then he disappeared. And he can appear based on the qualification or based on his pure devotee. Okay, pure devotee's mode. So that way, since Maharaj Yudhishthira knew the position of Krishna, he actually does not have to lament about his disappearance. Okay, but still, Maharaj Yudhishthira was lamenting. Okay. And Srila Prabhupada writes, when Maharaj Yudhishthira was lamenting the possibility of his disappearance, it was just in pursuance of a custom of lamenting the disappearance of a great friend. But if actually the Lord never quits his transcendental body, as is misconceived by less intelligent persons. The Lord left his body means that he left again his plenary portions in the respective Dhama, transcendental abodes, as he left his Virata Rupa in the material world. Okay. Next 9. From him only, all our kingly opulence, our kingdom, good vibes, life, progeny, control over our subjects, victory over our enemies, and future accommodation in higher planets has become possible. All this is due to his causeless mercy upon us. Okay. So if we see the sorry, you see the breakup here. So the first 5 verses, Maharaj Yudhishthira observes the downfall in people's character and qualities. We saw greed, anger, pride, quarreling with each other, like this. Okay. And here Maharaj Yudhishthira speaks to Bhima, recounting his worst fears and also recounting the Lord's mercy on him. Okay. So if we see here, so here in the 8th verse he says, has the time already arrived where the Lord is going to quit his earthly pastimes? And as soon as he thought about Krishna, then he thought about the mercy that Krishna has given to the Pandavas. Okay, so that's what he's recounting here. That all his kingly opulence, kingdom, good wife, life, progeny, control over subjects, victory over enemies, future accommodation and friends, all have become possible only because of him. And this is due to his causeless mercy upon him. Srila Prabhupada explains that material prosperity is attained by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Okay, otherwise it is not possible. So facilities are earned not only by one's hard manual labor or by unfair means, but by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Personal labor must be there in addition to the Lord's benediction, but without the Lord's benediction, no one is successful simply by personal labor. So personal labor is there, it's a prerequisite, but then the Lord's benediction is what sanctions, or that's what completes one's material prosperity. Only by one's personal labor one cannot become prosperous. Okay. So the ultimate sanction for all success rests in the hands of the Supreme Lord. Actually, Prabhupada gives this example that if a person has a medical problem and he's a patient, then it does not matter how much advanced treatment is given to him, but still, if he's not supposed to live, then he will die. But there are cases where there's no hope, but without medical treatment, a patient is cured astonishingly. So this is happening because of the Lord's sanction. Okay, otherwise it's not possible. So God's sanction is the immediate cause for all happenings, good or bad. And the pure devotee sees that. Okay, so pure devotee, he is able to see, or he has this vision where he can understand that whatever happens, whatever good or bad happens, it happens only because of the Lord's will. Okay, from his point of view, he has to do his duty. Okay, he has to render devotional service, or he has to follow dharma. That is what he is supposed to do. And whatever reactions or whatever results that he gets because of the Lord's desire, Lord's sanction. Okay, it's happening for everybody in this material world, but the pure devotee has the vision to see this. But non-devotees, they don't have the vision. Okay, they think that by their own personal endeavor, they can achieve so many things. Normally they call it as luck. They say, even though it is because of bad luck or good luck, but there's nothing called as good luck or bad luck. It's basically the sanction of the Lord. The Lord sanctions, then you get it. If the Lord does not sanction, it does not matter whatever you do, you will not get it. So you might call it luck. People call it good luck or bad luck like this. But it's not about luck, it's about the Lord's sanction, which is what is working behind. Okay. Just see, O man with a tiger's strength, how many miseries due to celestial influences, earthly reactions and bodily pains, all very dangerous in themselves, are foreboding danger in the near future by deluding our intelligence. Okay. So he is showing to Bhima all the different omens, all the different inauspicious omens that are happening now. And Srila Prabhupada speaks about material advancement. And he gives this amazing definition. He says, material advancement of civilization means advancement of the reactions of the threefold miseries due to celestial influence, earthly reactions, and bodily or mental pains. Okay, which is basically your adibhautik, adhyatmik and adidevic miseries. So material advancement is basically an increase of your miserable situation. In illusion, people think that by doing material advancement, they are becoming more happy, they are becoming more satisfied, like this. But in this modern time, even in the current time also, sociologists or people who can study what actually is happening have observed that by this so-called material advancement, people's lives have actually become more miserable than they gaining any satisfaction. Happiness is the ultimate goal for everybody, even for non-devotees or devotees, it doesn't matter. Happiness is the ultimate goal. But the non-devotees or the materialistic person, what he does is he thinks that he can become happy, or he can become satisfied with material advancement. Okay. Whereas a devotee or a transcendentalist, he knows that it is not possible. So those who are engaged in material advancement, actually they don't become happy. It's a reverse condition that happens, which is they become more and more miserable. So Prabhupada says here that advancement means advancement of the reactions of the threefold miseries due to Adidevik, Adibhautik and Adhyatmik klesha. And then he explains, he says, these are different calamities: excessive heat, cold, rain or lack of rain. Then there are after effects because of famine, disease and epidemic. Okay. And the aggregate result is agony of the body and mind. Man-made material science cannot do anything to counteract these threefold miseries. They are all punishments from the superior energy of Maya under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Okay. So they cannot counteract it at all. The reaction of material energy is never to be conquered because of the binding effects of the three modes. They can simply be overcome by one who surrenders fully in devotion under the lotus feet of the Lord. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada makes his point very clear that the reaction of material energy is never to be conquered because of the binding effects of the three modes. So anyone who is situated himself within the three modes, does not matter how much endeavor he makes, he will never be able to conquer for the reactions of material energy. He will never be able to conquer the threefold miseries. It is not possible. Okay, so all the material advancement that people are trying to make, or people think that by material advancement, by scientific advancement, by technology and so many other things, they can make their life comfortable here, that is not possible because everything is done under the modes of material nature. And anything which is within the modes will always have a corresponding reaction. And Srila Prabhupada very clearly he states that man-made material science cannot do anything to counteract the threefold miseries. They are all punishments from the superior energy of Maya under the direction of the Supreme Lord. The punishment will come. If you keep yourself within the prison, the punishment will always be there. Okay, so it cannot be counteracted. But they can simply be overcome by one who surrenders fully in devotion under the lotus feet of the Lord. Because by surrendering to the Lord, he goes beyond the three modes. So even in our life, when we are doing our devotional service, so if we are engaged in our materialistic activities, or if we are engaged in some whimsical activities, those are under the control of the three modes. So those will automatically give you miseries. Okay, so anything that is done within the modes will always give misery. Okay, so as practicing devotees, it's always important that we are consciously aware of what exactly we are doing or what exactly our activities are, so that we don't get under the influence of the three modes. If we get under the influence of the three modes, one of these three miseries will always come. Either Adibhautik, Adhyatmik or Adidevik. It will always be there. And it's observable also. Those devotees who have taken up devotional service, they come back or they go to their material life again, then they start feeling very miserable. Okay, and that is because of this Adhyatmik misery is being given to them. The punishment is given to them. Not really punishment, but the Lord is reminding that material, situating oneself within the three modes will not give you happiness, because one has tasted higher happiness under the transcendental loving devotional service of the Lord. Okay, so it looks like punishment, but actually it is not. It is just that the living entity himself is not able to tolerate the influence of the three modes. It's like that. Yeah, so from I think from this verse onwards, from 10 to 21, we'll just read, because Maharaj Yudhishthira will just count the inauspicious omens. He just say what are all the inauspicious omens. So he says, my left thigh, arm and eye are all quivering again and again. I am having heart palpitations due to fear. All this indicates undesirable happenings. So material existence is full of undesirables. Things we do not want are forced upon us by some superior energy. And we do not see that these undesirables are under the grip of the three modes of material nature. No one goes into the forest to set fires, but fires automatically take place in the forest, creating inconceivable calamities for the living beings of the forest. Okay. So, people within this material world, they understand that there are undesirables. There are undesirables, or there are miseries within this material world. Okay. But they do not see that these undesirables are under the grip of the three modes of material nature. And because they do not understand that the modes of nature is what is giving them these miseries, they become more frustrated. Okay. This is because of ignorance. When one is ignorant of how this material nature works, then the frustration is more. But if one is aware of what actually is happening with this material realm, then automatically he overcomes the lamentation. Okay, when Krishna was giving instructions to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita initially, okay, then he spoke about the modes of material nature, about activities, about reactions and things like that. Okay, just by that knowledge of how this material world works, one can overcome lamentation, because he knew that this is how it's working. Okay, if we are aware of something, of this thing, that how it works, then we can overcome that lamentation. But if something is unknown to us, okay, then it is fearful, right? We saw this in the previous, we had this question in the last test also. The fear problem, how it's more prominent. It's more prominent because of ignorance, right? That's the answer. Okay, it's because of ignorance and illusion. So if one is ignorant of how the material nature works, then he is more frustrated. He does not know why these miseries are coming to him. But if he is aware of how these things work, then he is not fearful. He can overcome fear, he can overcome lamentation. So Srila Prabhupada gives his example of forest fire. Okay, that the forest fire takes place automatically. So similarly, inconceivable calamities are there for the living beings also. And one important point that Srila Prabhupada makes here, that we have been discussing about the miseries of this material world, correct? So the miseries can be removed only by the mercy of the Lord, who sends his bona fide representatives to enlighten human beings and thus save them from all calamities. So Srila Prabhupada is not writing that we have to do welfare activity to remove the material miseries, because even the welfare activities are also under the grip of the three modes of material nature, because they are all related to this material body. Okay, so welfare activities cannot help anybody. So that's why our acharyas, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Saraswati, they were very, very particular about this welfare work, that it's completely mundane and nonsense, because it's within the grips of the three modes. And that which is within the grip of the three modes cannot give ultimate, it cannot take one beyond the miserable situation. It's not possible. So that's why the miseries can be removed only by the mercy of the Lord, who sends his bona fide representative to enlighten human beings. Okay, not to give them food or clothing like this. To enlighten, to give transcendental knowledge, and thus save them from all calamities. Because transcendental knowledge overcomes lamentation and fear. Okay, it gives this automatically, just by knowing this whole knowledge, just by knowing the nature of this material world, just by knowing the position of the living entity, or that we are not this body, we are the soul, that itself is such a satisfying experience actually. That okay, there is no death for the soul, that we live eternally. This material body is what is causing misery to us. And if we become detached from this material body, then the miseries will also automatically go away. We have to render devotional service to the Lord. So this knowledge itself is so satisfying, or that knowledge itself is so revealing, that even a neophyte devotee, he does not actually lament. Okay, he does not lament. One who has taken up devotional service, even at the starting stage, he overcomes this fearful situation and lamentation. Okay, just by knowing this transcendental knowledge. So that's why these miseries can be removed only by the mercy of the Lord, who sends his bona fide representatives to enlighten human beings. Okay, that is more important. So miseries are mitigated by preaching, not by welfare work. Just see, O Bhima, how the she-jackal cries at the rising sun and vomits fire, and how the dog barks at me fearlessly. Okay, this we see all the time. Okay, dogs barking at us. So the whole situation is inauspicious in Kali Yuga. Okay, so these are some bad omens indicating something undesirable in the near future. O Bhimsen, tiger amongst men. Now useful animals like cows are passing me on my left side, and lower animals like the asses are circumambulating me. My horses appear to weep upon seeing me. So, this according to this Nimitta Shastra, it said that the cows, when they circumambulate you, is very auspicious. Cows, when they go from the circumambulate, it's auspicious. When they go the other way around, anti-clockwise, then it's very inauspicious. Okay, so that's why it's mentioned. The cows are passing me on the left side. So the cow goes on the left side, and this anti-clockwise system is called inauspicious. Just see, this pigeon is the messenger of death. The shrieks of the owls and their rival crows make my heart tremble. It appears that they want to make a void of the whole universe. Right? So even the shrieks of the owls and crows, we see the shrieks of crows all the time, or at least I hear near my home. Now these things keep happening. Okay, these things are happening now. The stage. So we can understand, these omens, these inauspicious omens, they are actually, we see them quite frequently or quite normally, within this our normal experience also. So that basically gives an indication. When Shastra says that Kali Yuga or this age is inauspicious, is completely corrupted, we can understand that by these inauspicious omens, which are actually happening around us, which we can see, which we can observe. Just see how the smoke encircles the sky. Hazy sky. You go to big cities. Sky is always hazy, as if it's completely covered with smoke. Especially in Delhi, I think Bangalore also. So these are all inauspicious omens, foreboding of danger. It appears that the earth and mountains are throbbing. Just hear the cloudless thunder and see the bolts from the blue. Bolts from the blue basically means something that happens suddenly. Sudden occurrences are called bolts from the blue. Cloudless thunder. So thunder is there, but you cannot see any clouds. The wind blows violently, blasting dust everywhere and creating darkness. Clouds are raining everywhere with bloody disasters. So these are also observable in different countries of this world. We have different hurricanes, tornadoes, and things like that. Just see how the rays of the sun are declining and the stars appear to be fighting amongst themselves. Confused living entities appear to be ablaze and weeping. So this is one thing which you might, I don't know whether you have noticed it or not, but whenever there's inauspicious omens, it's always mentioned that the living entities become confused. Because they do not know what to be done. In natural course of activities, everything, if something is happening naturally, or normally, then we know how to react, or living entities know how to react according to that. If there's a day and night, then we know, because we have seen this from the start, it's something which is normal. So whatever happens in due course of time, we know how to react to that. But if something happens out of order, when it says eternal time has changed and different things are happening which are actually not supposed to happen, then the living entities become confused. Or they do not know how to react, they become bewildered. So whenever inauspicious omens appear, then the living entities become completely confused. And because of that, they also do those things which they actually don't do normally. So just like the she jackal howling at the rising sun. So the jackals howl at the dead of the night. They do not howl when the sun is rising. But because they are observing many inauspicious or many different changes within their environment, then they become bewildered and they do things which they actually don't do normally. So living entities are like that, the crows or the other things that we have seen before. These are like this. So confused living entities appear to be ablaze and weeping. Rivers, tributaries, ponds, reservoirs, and the mind are all perturbed, basically disturbed. Butter no longer ignites fire. What is this extraordinary time? What is going to happen? So Yudhishthira is this recounting or is observing all these things. The calves do not suck the teats of the cows, nor do the cows give milk. They are standing with tearful faces, crying, and the bulls take no pleasure in the pasturing grounds. The deities seem to be crying in the temple, lamenting and perspiring. They seem about to leave. All the cities, villages, towns, gardens, mines, and hermitages are now devoid of beauty and bereft of all happiness. I do not know what sort of calamities are now awaiting us. So these omens appear before something bad is going to happen. Okay, so he's seeing all these omens. And I think that all these earthly disturbances indicate some greater loss to the good fortune of the world. The world was fortunate to have been marked with the footprints of the lotus feet of the Lord. These signs indicate that this will no longer be. Okay. So Maharaj Yudhishthira is basically this whole chapter, he asks so many things and he tells so many things. Okay, but at the back of his mind, he always knew that something has happened with respect to the Supreme Lord. Okay. O Brahmana Shaunaka, while Maharaj Yudhishthira, observing the inauspicious signs on the earth at that time, was thus thinking to himself, Arjuna came back from the city of the Yadus. So he came back from Dwarka. When he bowed at his feet, the king saw that his dejection was unprecedented. So he has never seen Arjuna like this before. His face was downcast and tears glided from his lotus eyes. Okay. So this is also important. If we just imagine that Arjuna is already dejected because he knew that the Lord has disappeared. Okay, and he's already very dejected. He would have cried also. Okay, but when we are alone and something like this happens, then we try to console ourselves and we try to strengthen ourselves and we stop crying. But then when we see someone who's as dear to that person, when he saw Yudhishthira Maharaj, Yudhishthira Maharaj is very dear to the Lord. Okay, and the Lord has disappeared, and then he sees Yudhishthira Maharaj. Just by looking at Yudhishthira Maharaj, he starts crying again, remembering about the Lord. Okay, so now we have seen this, or I have seen this, that when someone dies in the family, and that person has cried, but he has consoled himself. Now he's a bit determined and strong. But when he sees his relatives, his close relatives come, then again he starts crying. Okay, because again he's reminded of all the activities that this person had with the person who has died. Okay, and all it reminds him of all these things. So because the Pandavas and Krishna were very close to each other and they have observed, Arjuna has seen Maharaj Yudhishthira speaking to Krishna, how Krishna has dealt, given respect to Maharaj Yudhishthira, how he has protected the Pandavas during this whole, their whole journey in the forest and things like that. Just by having darshan or just by looking at Maharaj Yudhishthira, Arjuna starts to cry again. Okay, so therefore tears glided from his lotus eyes as soon as he saw Maharaj Yudhishthira. Seeing Arjuna pale due to heartfelt anxieties, the king, remembering the indications of the sage Narada, questioned him in the midst of friends. Okay, so then he starts questioning, thinking about what Narada Muni has said, that the Yadu dynasty would be annihilated and then the Lord would disappear. So his questions would be about the welfare of Yadu dynasty, and he'll ask many questions. My dear brother, please tell me whether our friends and relatives, such as the Madhus, Bhojas, Dasharhas, Arhas, Satvatas, Andhakas, members of the Yadu family, are all passing their days in happiness. Is my respectable grandfather, Shurasena, in a happy mood? And are my maternal uncle, Vasudeva, and his younger brothers all doing well? His 7 wives, headed by Devaki, are all sisters. Are they and their sons and daughters-in-law all happy? Are Ugrasena, whose son was the mischievous Kamsa, and his younger brother Devaka still living? Are Hridika and his son Kritavarma happy? Are Akrura, Jayanta, Gada, Sarana, Shatrujit all happy? How is Balram, the personality of Godhead and the protector of the devotees? Okay. So Srila Prabhupada takes the opportunity to speak about Lord Balaram. Yeah, the purport is quite straightforward, and specifically he speaks about the expansions of the Lord, and he says that Balaram is an immediate expansion of Vishnu Tattva as Prakasha Vigraha of Lord Krishna. The Supreme Lord, all the one without a second, expands himself as many other living beings. And the expansions of the Jiva Shakti is also there. So they are also expansions of the energy of the Lord. So that way, the Jiva is also an expansion of the Lord, which we have discussed before. Okay. And one who considers the Jiva Shakti and the Vishnu Tattva to be on an equal level is considered a content soul of the world. Okay. Sri Rama or Balram is the protector of the devotees of the Lord. Baldeva acts as the spiritual master of all devotees. And then he speaks about Nityananda Prabhu and how he exhibited his causeless mercy by delivering Jagai and Madhai. Therefore, it is particularly mentioned herein that Balram is the protector of the devotees of the Lord. Sri Balram is the mercy incarnation of the Lord, manifested as a spiritual master, the savior of the pure devotees. So here in this, it's mentioned, no? Rama Bhagavan Sattvatam Prabhu. So this is basically an explanation that Srila Prabhupada gives in this purport. That Balaram is the protector of devotees or the master of all devotees, and he appears as the spiritual master to save his pure devotees. How is Pradyumna, the great general of the Vrishni family? Is he happy? And is Aniruddha, the plenary expansion of the personality of Godhead, faring well? Okay, so these two are asked about. And one thing that we should note here is Srila Prabhupada writes here, Pradyumna and Aniruddha are also plenary expansions of the personality of Godhead, and thus they are also Vishnu Tattva. Okay, and Krishna book, I think he writes the other way around. He says that Pradyumna is actually not Vishnu Tattva, but the potency of the Lord was invested into Pradyumna, who was actually Kamadev, who was burnt by the wrath of Lord Shiva, like this. Okay. These two things he writes. But here we can take Pradyumna and Aniruddha as the expansion, as the Chaturvyuha expansion of the Lord. Okay, we can understand that. Are all the chieftain sons of Lord Krishna, such as Sushena, Charudeshna, Samba, the son of Jambavati, and Rishabha, along with their sons, all doing well? When Srila Prabhupada writes about the family members of Lord Krishna, so we have discussed this before. Okay, and he says it's not astonishing that the Lord maintained a visible family consisting of 10 million members. A visible family of 10 million members. You will not find even that many people in a city, but the Lord's family itself consists of 10 million members. And I think Srila Prabhupada, he writes here, right? King Yudhishthira, while inquiring about the Lord's sons and grandsons Dwaraka, mentioned only the chieftains amongst them, for it was impossible for him to remember all the names of the Lord's family members. Right? You cannot remember 10,000 or rather 10 million members. It's not possible. One huge family. Because each of the sons of Krishna, there were 10 sons from each of his wife, and they in turn had 10 sons. Okay, so that way Krishna's grandsons and great grandsons itself was a huge number. Also, Shrutadeva, Uddhava, and others, including Nanda, Sunanda, and other leaders of liberated souls, who are constant companions of the Lord and are protected by Lord Balram and Krishna, are they all doing well in their respective functions? Do they, who are all eternally bound in friendship with us, remember our welfare? So Srila Prabhupada speaks about the companions of the Lord here, because it specifically mentioned that other leaders of the liberated soul who are constant companions of the Lord and are protected by Lord Balram and Krishna. So taking that cue, Srila Prabhupada speaks about the companions of the Lord. Okay, and again he speaks about expansions. And he says that the Lord, that there are Vishnu Tattvas and Jiva Tattvas, and that there is a difference between Vishnu Tattvas and Jiva Tattvas. The Jiva Tattva are infinitesimal particles of the Lord's potency, and therefore they require the protection of the Lord at all times. And to the eternal servitors of the Lord is pleased to give all protection at all times. The liberated souls never, therefore, think themselves as free as the Lord or as powerful as the Lord, but they always seek the protection of the Lord in all circumstances, both in the material world and in the spiritual world. Okay. But those, the conditioned souls who give the protection of the Lord and become so-called Lords themselves, out of spiritual ignorance, come back again to this material world, even after prolonged tapasya of the severest type. That is the verdict of all Vedic literature. So this purport Srila Prabhupada speaks about the liberated souls who are companions of the Lord, how they can never be equal to the Vishnu Tattvas, and they are always seeking protection under the Lord. And those conditioned souls who are not seeking protection of the Lord, they come back again to this material world. Okay. So Jiva as Tatatsa Shakti, liberated souls seek protection, conditioned souls come back again and again. So these are the three things which are discussed in this purport. Okay. Now he directly asks about Lord Krishna. So from 34 to 38, he inquires about Krishna to Arjuna, and then he also remembers his glories. Now this glories is basically primarily with respect to his associates in Dwarka. Okay. Initially, when Maharaj Yudhishthira thought about Krishna, then he recounted his mercy, Krishna's mercy on himself, okay, on the Pandavas, that all his kingly opulence, good wives, all this other things that he has gained, it has gained only by the mercy of the Lord. Okay. Now he will speak about how the Lord, because of the presence of the Lord, okay, then the Yadu dynasty, they flourished like anything. Is Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who gives pleasure to the cows, the senses and the brahmanas, and who is very affectionate towards his devotees, enjoying the pious assembly at Dwarakapuri, surrounded by friends. Yeah, so the Lord is described as Bhagavan, Govinda, Brahmanya and Bhaktavatsala in this verse. Bhagavan api Govindo, Brahmanya Bhaktavatsala, Kachit Pure Sudharmayam Sukhamaste Sukharivrtaha. Bhagavan, Govinda, Brahmanya and Bhaktavatsala. Yeah, and he speaks, Srila Prabhupada writes about this Brahminical culture, and he makes some couple of important points here, so we will see that. He says, a society devoid of cow protection and Brahminical culture is not under the direct protection of the Lord, just as the prisoners in the jail are not under the direct protection of the king, but under the protection of a severe agent of the king. Okay. And then he says, the Brahminical culture, or the development of the dormant qualities of goodness, namely truthfulness, equanimity, sense control, forbearance, simplicity, general knowledge, transcendental knowledge, and firm faith in the Vedic wisdom, one can become a Brahmana and thus see the Lord as he is. And here specifically he writes, the stage of a devotee which attracts the transcendental affection of the Lord does not develop unless one has developed the qualities of a Brahmana as above mentioned. The Lord is inclined to a Brahmana of quality and not of false prestige. Okay, so one thing that we should understand is that the culture has these qualities. The Brahminical culture has these qualities of truthfulness, equanimity, sense control, which is basically a translation of the verse from Bhagavad Gita, which mentions the qualities of the Brahmana. Satyam, Shocham, Shamadaya. Yes, that was okay. Yeah. So these qualities, okay, so it's not that these qualities should be cultivated only by Brahmanas. Okay, these qualities should be cultivated by everybody. Okay, so from cultural point of view, all living beings or all human beings are supposed to cultivate these qualities. Okay, so that is called Brahminical culture. Okay, so the culture is almost same for all the Varnas. Okay, they are supposed to cultivate these qualities because these qualities make one dear to the Lord. Okay, so it says, the stage of a devotee which attracts the transcendental affection of the Lord does not develop unless one has developed the qualities of a Brahmana as above mentioned. So, if all the Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudras, they all are supposed to become devotees, then they are supposed to develop these qualities. Okay, this culture, this Brahminical culture, these Brahminical qualities which attracts the transcendental affection of the Lord. Okay, So this attraction is not possible for those who have not developed these qualities. So these qualities are not only specific to one particular varna, but actually it is to be developed, or it should be cultivated by all the varnas. Okay. That's why he writes, the Lord is inclined to a Brahmana of quality and not of false prestige. Those who are less than a Brahmana by qualification cannot establish any relation with the Lord. Okay. Just as fire cannot be kindled from the raw earth unless there is wood, although there is a relation between wood and the earth. So when Srila Prabhupada says that, or Shastra itself says that a Vaishnava is above a Brahmana, okay, that's because without attaining the qualification of a Brahmana by this Brahminical culture, it is not possible to come to the level of Vaishnava. It's clearly mentioned here, right? They cannot establish any relation with the Lord. Okay. If you don't have any relation, you're basically not a Vaishnava. Correct? You have no relation. So only by, everybody, all human beings are supposed to cultivate these Brahminical qualities. So then they can establish the relationship with the Lord. So that's why the Vaishnava position is higher than that of a Brahmana, even from a cultural point of view. Okay. The original personality of Godhead, the Supreme Enjoyer, is staying in the ocean of the Yadu dynasty with Balarama, the primeval Lord Ananta, for the welfare, protection and general progress of the entire universe. Are the members of the Yadu dynasty, being protected by the arms of the Lord, are enjoying life like the residents of the spiritual sky. Okay. And specifically it's mentioned then Mahapaurishikaha, Parama Ananda Mahapaurishikaha. It's mentioned in the verse. So Srila Prabhupada explains that. And he says that Maharaj Yudhishthira has compared the Yadu dynasty to the ocean of milk and Sri Balram to the Ananta where Lord Krishna resides. He has compared the citizen of Dwaraka to the liberated inhabitants of the Vaikuntha Loka. And Srila Prabhupada explains about this Vaikuntha Loka, and he says each and every Vaikuntha planet is many, many times bigger than the biggest universe within this material world. And the inhabitants there look exactly like Lord Vishnu, and the inhabitants are known as Mahapaurishikas, or persons directly engaged in the service of the Lord. So the inhabitants of Dwaraka are also like Mahapaurishikas because they are so happy with the Lord. So when the Lord appears within this material world, he appears with his transcendental abode. So those who live in his transcendental abode, they are also the residents of the spiritual world. That's why they are addressed as Mahapaurishikas, or persons who are directly engaged in the service of the Lord. So those who are engaged directly in the service of the Lord, they reside in the abode of the Lord. So this is also important, that just by rendering devotional service to the Lord, one actually lives in the abode of the Lord. Simply by administering comforts at the lotus feet of the Lord, which is the most important of all services, the queens at Dwaraka, headed by Satyabhama, induced the Lord to conquer the demigods. Thus the queens enjoy things which are prerogatives of the wives of the controller of Thunderbolt. We have discussed this before when the ladies of Hastinapur, they were discussing about the queens of Dwaraka in I think the 11th chapter, correct? 11th chapter is where Lord Krishna, 10th chapter, departure of Lord Krishna for Dwaraka. There we have discussed this. Yes. And we discussed specifically that the Lord accepted the high quality of devotional service of the queens, and he was not enchanted by their smiles or by their feminine attractiveness. Like this. Yeah, we had this in the 12th chapter also, right? 11th and 12th chapter, when Krishna enters into Dwaraka, into each of his palaces. 12th chapter. That is 13th. Dhritarashtra quits home. Okay, so 11th chapter. Yeah, Lord Krishna enters into Dwaraka. Yeah, so their dealings with the queens. This is where we discussed. Correct. Text 38. The great heroes of the Yadu dynasty, being protected by the arms of Lord Shri Krishna, always remain fearless in every respect, and therefore their feet trample over the Sudharma assembly house, which the best demigods deserved, but which was taken away from them. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada speaks about how the Lord is served with the best of what is available in the universe, and the Lord thus protects his servants. The Lord is equal in behavior to all living beings, yes, but he is partial to his pure devotees, being very affectionate toward them. So we have discussed this before. The state assembly house is constructed according to the dignity of the particular state. In heavenly planets, the state assembly house called Sudharma was deserving of the dignity of the best of the demigods. But the Yadu people, they forcefully brought this Sudharma into Dwarka. Okay. And they were able to use such force because they were certain of the indulgence and protection of the Supreme Lord Krishna. In other words, the Lord is provided with the best things in the universe by his pure devotees, and Lord Krishna was provided with all kinds of comfort and facilities available within the universe by the members of the Yadu dynasty. And in return, such servitors of the Lord were protected and fearless. So that's why the Lord is served with the best of this universe, and in turn he protects his servitors. Okay, so fearfulness again. Srila Prabhupada very clearly states here. Fearfulness is a sort of illusion for the living being when he is in slumber due to forgetting his eternal relation with the Lord. This we discussed in this class, that when one is aware of his eternal relation with the Lord, then there is no fearfulness anymore. There is no fear. Okay. The tiger, he gives the example, a person may be fearful of a tiger in a dream, but another man who is awake by his side sees no tiger there. So the tiger is a myth for both of them. One who is dreaming as well as one who is awake. Because the tiger does not exist. Because there is no tiger. But the man's forgetfulness of his awakened life is fearful. Whereas the man who has not forgotten his position is not at all fearful. Thus the members of the Yadu dynasty were fully awake in their service to the Lord. And therefore there was no tiger for them to be afraid of at any time. Even if there were a real tiger, the Lord was there to protect them. So this is the basic point. That the tiger is an illusion, or the material misery is an illusion for both the conditioned soul as well as the pure devotees, for both the materialistic person as well as this person, because he thinks that he is within this material world, or he identifies himself with the modes like this. But one who is aware, or one who has transcendental knowledge, then he knows that actually there is no misery, or the material nature. The misery is there because we misidentify with this body. Otherwise there should be no misery. Because the soul and matter, they do not mix. So the body and the soul, they are actually, the body is a covering on the soul. It's not the soul is mixed with the body. So therefore actually there is no suffering for the soul from that point of view. Okay. Now, so till this point, Yudhishthira Maharaj, he spoke about, or he asked about the welfare of the Yadu dynasty, of the people in the Yadu dynasty, and also about Krishna. Okay. And then he's, after inquiring about the welfare of the Yadu dynasty, then he himself kind of answers, saying that because they are protected by Krishna, therefore they should not have any calamity on them. Because they are protected by the Lord. Because last two verses, if you see, he's speaking, Srila Prabhupada especially writes about the protection of the Lord for his pure devotees and the affection that he has for his pure devotees. Okay, so this is what we have been saying in the last 3-4 verses. Yudhishthira Maharaj is basically answering his own question that, because Krishna is there, so all the questions which I have asked about the welfare of the inhabitants of, or the Yadu dynasty, it's actually a non-question, because the Lord is aware, Lord is there and he is protecting his devotees. So I don't see any problem. If Krishna is there, then there should not be any problem with the Yadu folks. So therefore, what is the cause of rejection? So now he's asking Arjuna directly that has something happened to you which is basically the cause of rejection? Because the Lord is there to protect the Yadu dynasty. So now you can see the way Yudhishthira Maharaj's mind is working. Initially when he saw the inauspicious omens, he thought that Krishna has left. Okay. And then when he sees Arjuna that is dejected, Then he starts speaking about, asking about the welfare of Yadu dynasty, because Narad Muni foretold that they will be annihilated first, and then Krishna gave an indication like this. Then Krishna will go. So he starts speaking about Yadu dynasty. But when he's speaking about the Yadu dynasty, then he also sees, oh, because Krishna is there, what can happen to the Yadu people? So therefore, that should not be a problem. So then he asks to Arjuna, okay, what exactly is the problem? Why are you so dejected? My brother Arjuna, please tell me whether your health is alright. You appear to have lost your bodily luster. Is this due to other disrespecting and neglecting you because of your long stay at Dwaraka? Okay. So from all angles of vision, Maharaj inquired from Arjuna about the welfare of Dwaraka. But he concluded at last that as long as Lord Krishna himself was there, nothing inauspicious could happen. This is that state of mind. Nothing will happen to the Yadu dynasty. But at the same time, Arjuna appeared to be bereft of his body luster. And thus the king inquired about his personal welfare and asked so many vital questions. So this is the connection. Okay, why he is asking about Arjuna's welfare. Okay, just by thinking about Yadu dynasty and how mercifully or how mightily Krishna has protected Dwaraka. Okay, and Dwaraka-vasis and Mathura-vasis, all of them, over this period of time, nothing inauspicious could happen to them. Okay, so that's his consciousness now. Has someone addressed you with unfriendly, inauspicious words? Could you not give charity to one who asked, or could you not keep your promise to someone? So he's asking those questions which a Kshatriya is actually supposed to maintain. Okay, so first thing is this due to others disrespecting and neglecting you because of your long stay at Dwaraka? Okay, so now if someone stays at one place for a very long time, then one becomes very callous towards that person, towards the guest. Okay, so Yudhishthira Maharaj's question is, something like that has happened to you? Okay, actually, Arjuna has stayed with Krishna for even longer period of time. Okay, but then at that time Arjuna did not lose his body luster. But now it has happened. So different questions are being prompted by Maharaj Yudhishthira. Has someone addressed you with unfriendly, inauspicious words? Could you not give charity to one who asked, or could you not keep your promise to someone? Okay, so Srila Prabhupada explains this, and he says that a Kshatriya or a rich man is sometimes visited by persons who are in need of money. And when they ask for donation, it's the duty of the possessor of wealth to give in charity in consideration of person, place and time. But if a Kshatriya or a rich man fails to comply with this obligation, he must be very sorry for this discrepancy. Similarly, one should not fail to keep his promise to give in charity. So it's a Kshatriya dharma. Whenever someone comes and asks for a charity, the Kshatriya must give that. Okay. Or it's infamy for him. And we have different great examples. So we have the example of Ramji, the example of Maharaj Shibi. Great examples are there. And even Maharaj Yudhishthira himself. It is said that Maharaj Yudhishthira used to give charity to 1,000 Brahmanas every day. And to do that, he had 1,000. Yeah, I think Draupadi had 1 lakh maid servants to serve 1,000 Brahmanas every day. And she personally knew the names of each of these 1 lakh maid servants who are engaged in service of giving charity to those 1,000 Brahmanas. So he himself was very adept or very expert in giving charity. So he's asking Arjuna, if something has happened that you are not able to give charity, you are always the protector of the deserving living beings, such as Brahmanas, children, cows, women, old men, and the diseased. Could you not give them protection when they approached you for shelter? And is that the reason why you are so dejected, you are crying? Because Arjuna was crying also, at this point. And for Kshatriya, if he is not able to do these things, then he should become so dejected that it's as if his whole existence has evaporated. It's like that. Yeah. So Srila Prabhupada writes that these living entities, Brahmanas, children, cow, women, old men, and the diseased, should always be protected by the Kshatriya king. And if such living beings do not get protection by the Kshatriya or the royal order or by the state, it is certainly shameful for the Kshatriya or the state. If such things had actually happened to Arjuna, Maharaj Yudhishthira was anxious to know about these discrepancies. And we know that in this if we compare it with the current age, the Brahmanas, even the so-called Brahmanas, they have no protection. Children are not protected. Women are not protected. Cows are being slaughtered. Okay, old men are considered as burden to the society. Okay, so like this, it's completely messed up. So that way, the government, the present administration is totally useless or bogus, because they cannot give protection to these deserving living beings. Have you contacted a woman of impeachable character, or have you not properly treated a deserving woman, or have you been defeated on the way by someone who is inferior or equal to you? Okay. So this means impeachable character means of low character. Have you contacted a woman of low character, or have you not properly treated a deserving woman? Okay, so these are the activities of Kshatriya that Srila Prabhupada only explains here. He says that there are different considerations for contact between man and women. So it appears from this verse that during the time of the Pandavas, free contact between man and woman was allowed in certain conditions only. The higher caste men, namely the Brahmins and Kshatriyas, could accept a woman of the Vaishya or the Shudra community. But a man from the lower caste could not contact a woman of the higher caste. Okay. Even a Kshatriya could not contact a woman of the Brahmana caste. The wife of a Brahmana is considered one of the 7 mothers. Such contact between a man and woman was known as Uttama and Adhama. Contact of a Brahmana with a Kshatriya woman is Uttama, but the contact of a Kshatriya with a Brahmana woman is Adhama, and therefore condemned. A woman approaching a man for contact should never be refused, but at the same time, the discretion as above mentioned may also be considered. Okay. And then Srila Prabhupada gives some examples here. The Bhima was approached by Hidambi, which was lower than Shudra, so therefore he could accept. Yayati refused to marry the daughter of Shukracharya because of Shukracharya being a Brahmana. Okay, but ultimately he did marry. He did marry Devyani, right? Yes, he did marry Devyani because Shukracharya had given a benediction that there will not be any sin because of Varna Shankara. Varna Shankara will not happen. And the same thing happened between Shakuntala and Dushyant also. Right? Shakuntala was born of a Brahmana, Vishwamitra, and she was brought up by Kanva Rishi, who is the descendant of Kaushik Rishi. So she was brought up as a Brahmana, but Dushyanta was the king. Okay, and they wanted to get married, but Kanva Rishi, because he gave a benediction that Varna Shankara sin will not happen to you, therefore that union was okay. Okay, so there are circumstances within Shastra itself where these things have happened, but then it has been approved by a higher authority, and because of that, the union or the contact between the corresponding man and woman was not considered adhama, because if we Dushyanta and Shakuntala, they had a son Bharat. Okay, and Bharat was a great king. Do you know this story? Yeah. So Bharat was definitely not a Varna Shankara. Correct. So Bharat was a great king. Okay. In the line of the Kurus. And he says Vyasadeva was also begotten by Parashar through Satyavati, and Pandu and Dhritarashtra through Vyasadeva, like this. So contact between man and woman is natural, but that also must be carried out under regulative principles, so that social consecration may not be disturbed, or unwanted worthless population be increased for the unrest of the world. Okay, so unwanted worthless population increases the unrest, or it basically contributes to the social chaos. Okay, so this one is very, very important that each of these points that Srila Prabhupada makes in his purports, it gives an indication, or it not indication, it actually directly says that a person must know his varna. Actually, he must know where he belongs. Okay, his varna and his ashrama should be very, 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 very clear to that person, and that will only lead to social harmony. If a person is not aware, or if not even a person, if a community or as a society or as the whole country or the whole village or the whole society, community itself does not know the varna of each person, then it is not possible to have a proper social setup, to have proper social harmony. It is not possible, because right from a varna, particular brahmana, vaishya, kshatriya, shudra, they have their prescribed duties that should be performed. And if the prescribed duties are not performed, then it's a foul means of occupation, Srila Prabhupada says. It's a foul means, it's not proper, it's sinful, it's adharmic. And even, all the social functions, like marriage, should happen between, compatible varnas, like this, it's mentioned. Otherwise, it will lead to social chaos. So that's why this varna and ashrama institution is quite important. See, these considerations might not be very prominent when it comes to those who have taken up devotional service. Okay, seriously. Those who have taken up devotional service seriously with all sincerity, then it might not be a consideration of varna. We see even in Srila Prabhupada's case that he used to get devotees married. The devotee boy would be there and girl would be there, and then he will arrange marriage for them. And we do not find any record where he's saying, okay, this boy is of Brahmana nature, this boy is of this nature, and that nature, like that. He decides, and then they get married, and they both render devotional service together, like this. So this has happened. So when it comes to devotees, now these considerations can be overseen. Okay, if they are actually engaged fully in devotional service. But from the society's point of view, okay, if when people are not actually engaged in devotional service, or people are not seriously or fully 100% engaged in devotional service, then the social considerations also come into picture. And for social harmony, so that devotional service can be rendered on a broader scale, the institution of varna and ashrama becomes important. So there the duties of each of the varna, duties of each of the ashramas that a person situates himself in, and the duties of women all become very prominent. Because that situates one in dharma and becomes conducive for rendering devotional service. Okay, so these things are important. Otherwise, Srila Prabhupada would not be writing about all these things. Okay. So that's why he says that it must be carried out under regulated principles, so that social consecration may not be disturbed or unwanted worthless population be increased for the unrest of the world. So it's basically directive that they must be carried out. It must be done in that way, like this. Yeah, and it's abominable for a Kshatriya to be defeated by someone who is inferior. And Arjuna was defeated by Bhishma Deva, so that is okay because Bhishma Deva was superior to him. But Karna was equal to Arjuna or even inferior to Arjuna in several aspects. So Karna was killed by crooked means. Because these are the engagements of Kshatriya Srila Prabhupada writes. Okay. Have you not taken care of old men and boys who deserve to dine with you? Have you left them and taken your meals alone? Have you committed some unpardonable mistake which is considered to be abominable? Okay. So it's the duty of a householder to feed first of all the children, the old members of the family, the brahmanas and the invalids. And after that, he is required to call first a hungry man thrice on the road, and then only he should take his meals. Okay. So these are the duties of a householder. Not only Kshatriya, but all grihasthas are supposed to do this. Or is it that you are feeling empty for all time because you might have lost your most intimate friend, Lord Krishna? Oh my brother Arjuna, I can think of no other reason for your becoming so dejected. So finally he concludes. Okay, he says that I have spoken so much, but I think it's because Lord Krishna, your most important friend, has departed, and I can think of no reason. So all the inquisitiveness of Maharaj Yudhishthira about the world situation was already conjectured by Maharaj Yudhishthira on the basis of Lord Krishna's disappearance from the vision of the world. Right from the first, second or third verse onwards, we discussed Maharaj Yudhishthira had the idea that Lord Krishna has disappeared, and his inquiries were also pertaining to that. And this was now disclosed by him because of the acute dejection of Arjuna, which could not have been possible otherwise. So even though he was doubtful about it, he was obliged to inquire frankly from Arjuna on the basis of Sri Narada's indication. So thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purpose of the first canto, 14th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Disappearance of Lord Krishna. So even though it's not directly clear that the Lord has disappeared, but still the chapter is named Disappearance of Lord Krishna because it speaks about the plight of his devotees. Okay, so when the Lord disappears, what do the devotees undergo? Okay, what do they see? What happens with this material world? Okay, we saw all the list of inauspicious omens, and we also saw the mood of his devotees, Maharaj Yudhishthira. Not much of Bhima, but of Arjuna, Maharaj Yudhishthira and Arjuna, like this. And what kind of thought process devotees go through when Krishna disappears. So that's why this chapter is the disappearance of Krishna. And then it's confirmed in the next chapter, in the 15th chapter, and the Pandavas retire timely. Okay. So the next chapter has, I think, 51 verses. Yeah. And Srila Prabhupada speaks about several points in his purport. So we'll see that in the next session. Okay. Any questions you have? Any questions, doubts? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
oh, Premanand.
Hare Bol.